My wife left me for another man. A few years later, she begged me to take her back. I met her on a Tuesday that didn't feel like it mattered. That's how most turning points show up, quiet, unannounced, wearing plain clothes. I was 26, working a job that paid the bills and left my hands smelling like metal and printer ink. IT support for a mid-sized logistics company. Not glamorous, but honest work. I fixed what broke. I showed up on time. I kept my word. Those were my rules back then, same as now. That afternoon, the office coffee machine gave up the ghost. Again, I was down the hall with a screwdriver and a paperclip, doing what I always did, bringing dead things back to life. When I straightened up, I saw her standing there with a paper cup in her hand, watching me like I was performing a magic trick instead of clearing a clogged valve. "You're a hero," she said. I laughed. A short one. If that's true, the bar's pretty low. She smiled at that. Not the polite office smile people wear like a badge, but something real. Curious. Warm. The kind that lingers. That was the first thing I noticed about her. She looked at people when they talked. Not through them. Not past them. At you. Her name was Emily. She worked in marketing 2 floors up. New hire. I'd seen her around once or twice. Always carrying a notebook like it mattered. She had dark hair she never quite managed to tame, and eyes that paid attention. That kind of attention can make a man feel 10 feet tall or laid bare, depending on how honest he's been with himself. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. About nothing. About coffee, mostly. About how the machine hated everyone equally. When her cup was empty, she thanked me like I'd done her a real favor. Before she left, she said, "You ever take breaks?" I shrugged. "Sometimes." "Well," she said, backing away, "if you ever feel like taking one around 3, I owe you a decent cup of coffee." Then she was gone. I stood there a second longer than necessary, holding a screwdriver and thinking about how strange it was for a Tuesday to suddenly matter. I didn't see her again for a week. That wasn't intentional. Life doesn't pause just because something interesting wanders through. Servers crash. Phones ring. People panic over lost passwords like it's the end of civilization. But I thought about her, more than I expected to. The next Tuesday at 2:58, I found myself washing my hands in the break room sink, trying to act like this was just another afternoon. I checked the clock. 3 on the dot. She was already there, leaning against the counter with 2 cups. "Right on time," she said. I nodded. I try to be reliable. We took the cups outside to the small concrete patio behind the building. It overlooked a parking lot and a half-dead tree. Not romantic, but quiet. She asked about my job. I told her the truth, that it wasn't what I dreamed of as a kid, but kept the lights on and my conscience clear. I asked about hers. She talked about campaigns and deadlines, about how she liked building something out of words and ideas. "I like fixing things," I said at one point. She looked at me over the rim of her cup. "People or machines?" I thought about that. "Machines," I said. "People are trickier." She smiled again, softer this time. That's fair. There was an ease to talking to her. No performing. No selling myself. Just words landing where they were meant to. When the break ended, she hesitated before heading back inside. "So," she said, "same time next week?" "Yeah," I said. "I think I can manage that." Weeks turned into a pattern. Tuesdays became hours. Coffee, then longer walks. Lunches when schedules lined up. I learned she grew up not far from where I did. Different neighborhoods, same kind of roots. Nothing handed to her. Nothing promised. She laughed easily, but listened hard. She remembered small things, I said in passing. My dad's old truck. My mom's habit of humming when she cooked. The way I hated crowded bars. One afternoon, she asked why I never talked about dating. I shrugged. Didn't end well last time. She didn't push. Just nodded. That was another thing about her. She didn't pry. She waited until people opened the door themselves. When I finally did tell her, it came out simple. No drama. Just facts. A relationship that burned hot and died fast. Lessons learned the hard way. I like steady, I said. Fireworks are overrated. She smiled at that, but there was something thoughtful behind it. Me too, she said. I'm tired of chaos. That was the first time I felt that quiet click inside. The sound of two people recognizing the same language. Our first date wasn't really a date. It was a Friday night. She texted, First time she'd ever done that. I'm going to this food truck thing downtown. You're welcome to come if you want. No pressure. No expectations. I went. We stood in line under string lights, sharing fries out of paper basket. She wore a denim jacket and looked comfortable in her own skin. That mattered to me more than anything else. We talked about music, about places we wanted to see someday. She wanted to visit the coast. I wanted to drive west with no real plan. Why west? She asked. Feels like possibility, I said. Sunsets don't apologize out there. She laughed. That might be the most poetic thing you've said. Don't get used to it. When the night ended, there was no awkward moment. No leaning in too fast. We hugged. Longer than friends, shorter than lovers. Good night, she said. Good night, I answered. I drove home with the windows down, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. We took it slow. On purpose. Movies at my place. Dinners at hers. Long talks that stretched past midnight. She told me about her parents, loving but demanding. About the pressure to be more, do more, aim higher. They want me to marry someone impressive, she said once, staring at her glass. Someone who looks good on paper. I didn't know it then, but that sentence would echo years later. At the time, I just said, impressive is overrated. She reached for my hand. You're impressive. I squeezed back. Careful. I might start believing that. The night we officially became us wasn't dramatic. We were sitting on her couch, rain tapping the windows. She leaned her head on my shoulder like it belonged there. I don't want to see anyone else, she said quietly. I looked down at her. Me neither. That was it. No speeches. No promises written in the sky. Just two people choosing the same direction. I remember thinking, this feels solid. I didn't know then how rare that feeling really was, or how fragile. But back then, in those early days, she looked at me like I was enough. And for a while, that was true. That's how we met. Before the cracks. Before the silence. Before she walked away. And years later, came back asking for a door I'd already closed. That comes later. For now, this is where it started. By 3 months in, Emily had a drawer in my apartment without ever asking. A toothbrush. A hoodie she never gave back. Little signs that said I'm staying without using the words. That was the thing with her. Nothing felt rushed, but nothing felt temporary either. We built a rhythm. Coffee runs. Grocery lists. Quiet nights on the couch. It wasn't fireworks. It was solid. And I like solid. One night at a worn-down diner, she asked me what I wanted out of life. I didn't dress it up. I told her I wanted peace. A real home. A partner I could count on. A life that didn't feel like I was always waiting for the next hit. She said she wanted that too, but she said it carefully, like someone measuring the weight of the words before letting them go. I didn't think much of it then. I should have. A few weeks later, she invited me to a work event. That was new. Rooftop. City lights. People who laughed too loud and sized each other up for sport. I wore my best shirt, stood tall, didn't pretend to be anything I wasn't. That's where I met her boss. Smooth guy. Expensive watch. The kind of man who asks questions to remind you where he thinks you stand. He tested me without saying it outright. Asked about ambition, titles, ladders. I told him the truth. I was good at my job. I wasn't chasing status. He nodded like that confirmed something. Emily squeezed my arm. A quiet ignore him. I did, but I remembered. Men like that don't talk down by accident. Afterward, Emily was quiet. She brushed it off, asked me not to make it a thing. So I didn't. Not because I agreed, but because I loved her, and because I still believed letting things slide was the same as being understanding. That belief doesn't age well. Meeting her friends came next. That went fine on the surface, but I felt the measuring tape again. Especially from her closest friend, Jessica. Polite smile. Sharp eyes. Protective in a way that felt like judgment. Later that night, Emily told me I'd done good. That word stuck with me. Like I'd taken a test I didn't know I was sitting for. Then she mentioned her parents. They were coming to town. She didn't know how to introduce me. She said it wasn't about me. It was about them. Their expectations. Their standards. I listened. I stayed calm. But I told her one thing clearly. I wasn't going to be someone she hid. I didn't ask her to fight her family. I didn't ask for drama. I just asked not to be treated like a problem she had to manage. She said she needed time. I believed her. But I also understood something then, deep in my gut. Love that only exists in private isn't safe. And time can be a bridge or a warning. That was the moment it stopped being simple. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first crack. The first time I noticed the distance, it wasn't loud. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't silence either. It was a pause. Emily would look at her phone a second longer before answering me. She'd say yeah when she meant maybe. She'd kiss me goodbye like she was checking something off instead of anchoring herself. Little things. Easy to explain away if you want to stay comfortable. I wanted to stay comfortable. Her parents' visit got closer, and everything around it got vague. No dates. No plans. Just we'll see, and I'm figuring it out. I didn't push. I figured pressure would only make it worse. I trusted her. Or maybe I trusted the version of her I'd fallen in love with. One night, we were making dinner at her place. Pasta. Cheap wine. Music low. She was quiet again. I finally said it. You've been somewhere else lately. She froze for half a second, then kept stirring. I've just been stressed. About what? I asked. She shrugged. Work. Family. Everything. I leaned against the counter. I'm not asking you to solve it. I just want to know where I stand. She stopped stirring, set the spoon down too carefully. You stand with me, she said. Why are you acting like you don't? Because it feels like I'm standing alone, I almost said. But I didn't. Instead, I said okay. That became a pattern. Me noticing. Her minimizing. Me backing off. It's amazing how fast you can train yourself to doubt your own instincts. Then there was the dinner. She told me 2 days before. Her parents wanted to see her. Just her. Just dinner, she said. Nothing big. I nodded. All right. She hesitated. I didn't think it was the right time for you to come. There was again. That careful tone. Like she was handling glass. I kept my voice even. You don't think they'd like me? She winced. That's not fair. Is it wrong? She didn't answer right away. That told me enough. She left that night, dressed nicer than usual. Hair perfect. Jacket I'd never seen before. I sat on my couch and stared at the dark TV screen, wondering why I suddenly felt like a secret again. Like I'd stepped backward without moving. She came back late. Quieter than when she left. How'd it go? I asked. She kicked off her shoes. Fine. That was all I got. I didn't press. But something in me hardened. Just a little. A week later, I ran into her by accident downtown. She was laughing with a guy I didn't recognize. Well-dressed. Confident. Hand resting just a little too close to her back. She saw me and jumped like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Theo. Hey, she said, pulling away from him. I nodded at the guy. What's up? This is Daniel, she said too quickly. From my parents' side. Old family friend. He smiled like he already knew everything about me. Nice to finally meet you. Finally. That word landed wrong. We exchanged pleasantries. Nothing rude. Nothing obvious. But I felt it, the comparison happening in real time. Him scanning me. Measuring. When he left, Emily was flushed. You could have told me you were meeting him, I said. It wasn't planned, she said. It just happened. Funny how that excuse only ever works one direction. That night, I didn't sleep much. I wasn't jealous. That wasn't it. I was alert. There's a difference. Jealousy is fear of losing something. Alertness is realizing you already might be. The next morning, I asked her straight. Is there someone else? Her eyes went wide. No, of course not. Are you sure? She bristled. Why would you even ask that? I held her gaze. Because you're pulling away. Because I'm meeting people from your world by accident instead of introduction. Because I feel like I'm being edited out. She looked down. You're overthinking. Maybe. But overthinking doesn't usually come with this much quiet certainty. The last straw wasn't dramatic. It was a phone call she took in the bathroom. Door locked. Voice low. Laughing in that soft way she used to laugh with me. When she came out, I didn't accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, I heard you. She went pale. It was nothing. I nodded slowly. That's what scares me. She started crying then. Real tears. Not fake. Not manipulative. I'm just confused, she said. Everyone wants something from me. I almost said so do I. But that wouldn't have been true. All I wanted was honesty. I sat beside her and said the hardest thing I'd said so far. If you're already halfway gone, I won't beg you to stay. She looked at me like she hadn't expected that. I love you, she said. I believe she meant it. But love that can't stand up in daylight doesn't last. I knew it then. I just didn't know how much it was going to cost me to be right. The day she left didn't start like an ending. It started like a Wednesday. I went to work, fixed a server crash, ate lunch at my desk, thought about texting her something dumb just to make her smile, then decided not to bother her. I told myself I was being respectful. That's what I called it back then, respect. Now, I know it was me stepping back, so she didn't have to push. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt off. Not empty, just unsettled, like the air had been moved around. Her shoes weren't by the door. Emily never remembered to put her shoes away. Ever. I set my keys down slowly and walked into the living room. Her throw blanket was gone, the one she always wrapped around herself, even in summer. The bookshelf looked thinner. The picture frame we hadn't filled, yet was missing. I stood there a long second before I checked the bedroom. Half the closet was empty. Not messy, not rushed. Clean. Intentional. She'd packed like someone who knew she wasn't coming back. My phone buzzed in my hand like it already knew what I was about to read. Theo, I'm so sorry. I can't do this anymore. I need space. I need to figure out who I am without disappointing everyone. This isn't about you. Please don't hate me. I read it twice, then a third time. This isn't about you is one of the cruelest sentences a person can write. It pretends to soften the blow while making sure you have nowhere to stand. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. No anger yet, just that hollow pressure behind the ribs like all the air had been pulled out without warning. I called her, straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't chase her across town. I didn't show up at her place or her parents' hotel or wherever she decided she belonged that night. I just sat there and let it settle, because deep down I already knew. She called me the next day. Her voice sounded tired. Not guilty, just tired. I didn't know how to do it in person, she said. I kept my voice steady. You did it just fine. She flinched at that. I could hear it. I never meant to hurt you. I exhaled through my nose. That doesn't mean much after the fact. There was a pause. Then she said it. I reconnected with someone. There it was. Clean. Simple. Like ripping off a bandage after the wound's already infected. Who? I asked. She said his name. A name I'd heard before. From her parents' dinner stories. From the way her mother talked about ambition and potential and the right kind of man. The one who checked every box I didn't. He understands my world, she said, like that explained everything. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. I guess I didn't. That's not what It's fine, I said, cutting her off. Not sharp, just final. You made a choice. She started crying then. Real crying. Or maybe just relief. I never stopped caring about you, she said. I closed my eyes. That's the problem, Emily. Caring isn't the same as choosing. She didn't argue. That told me everything. The weeks after were quiet in a way that felt unnatural. No messages. No accidental calls. No, I miss you, text at 1 a.m. She vanished clean. Mutual friends stopped inviting me to things. Not out of cruelty, out of discomfort. I didn't fit the updated story. I was the part that made people uneasy. I threw myself into work. Long hours. Extra shifts. Fixing problems nobody else wanted to touch. There's something satisfying about broken systems. They don't lie. They don't pretend. They either work or they don't. People are messy, eh? At night, I'd come home, eat something simple, sit on the couch, and let the quiet press in. Some nights it hurt. Some nights it didn't. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a slow negotiation with yourself. I didn't stalk her online. I didn't ask around. But word travels. I heard she was engaged within a year. I heard it was fast. I heard her parents were thrilled. I heard the wedding was beautiful. Good for them. I meant that. Mostly. What I didn't hear, what nobody tells you, is what it's like when someone chooses status over substance. They don't look back right away. They're too busy proving to themselves they were right. I rebuilt my life quietly. New apartment. Better job. I stopped apologizing for who I was and started investing in it instead. I learned something important during that time. Being left doesn't make you weak. Staying where you're not chosen does. Years passed. I thought of Emily less and less. Not with anger, just with distance. Like a town you once lived in that no longer exists. Then one evening, years later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. I'm glad I did, because that's when the story turned. The phone rang at 9:47 p.m. That mattered because nobody calls that late unless something's wrong or they've run out of places to hide. Unknown number. I stared at it while it buzzed itself quiet, then rang again. Same number. Same insistence. I answered on the third ring. Hello. There was breathing on the other end. Not heavy, just unsure. Then she said my name. Theo. I didn't need her to say anything else. Some voices don't leave you. They just go dormant. I sat down slowly on the edge of my couch. Emily, I said. Not warm. Not cold. Just accurate. She exhaled like she'd been holding it for years. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I wasn't sure I would either, I said. Silence stretched. Long enough to be honest. Finally, she said, I heard you moved. I looked around my apartment. Clean. Simple. Mine. Yeah. A while ago. I had to really dig to find your number, she said. I hope that's okay. I didn't respond right away. That was my first small victory of the night. Not rushing to make her comfortable. What do you W? There it was. The question she'd been circling. I need to talk to you, she said. In person. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. Why? Another pause. Shorter this time. My marriage is over. There it was. Not dramatic. Not shouted. Just dropped between us like a weight she expected me to help carry. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I meant it. In a way you're sorry it rained on someone else's picnic. He's leaving, she added quickly. Or, he already left. I don't even know how to say it. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. I learned a long time ago that details don't change the outcome. I thought you were happy, I said. She laughed softly. No humor in it. So did everyone else. That tracked. Emily had always been good at looking like things were fine. I made a mistake, she said. The biggest one of my life. I closed my eyes. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Hearing that doesn't feel like winning. It feels like confirmation. And confirmation is quiet. We met 3 days later. Public place. Coffee shop near the river. Neutral ground. I got there early, out of habit, so where I could see the door. She walked in right on time. Older. Tired. Still beautiful, but in a way that had been weathered. Like something valuable that hadn't been cared for properly. She saw me and stopped for a second. Like she needed to steady herself. I stood. We didn't hug. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. We sat. She talked first, words spilling like she'd rehearsed them alone too many nights. How things had looked perfect on paper. How her parents had approved. How she tried to make herself fit into a life that kept asking her to be smaller in ways she didn't expect. He was always busy, she said. Always somewhere else. Even when he was home. I stirred my coffee. Sounds familiar. She flinched. Deservedly. I know, she said. I know. She told me about the fights. About the silences. About the realization that she'd traded one kind of pressure for another and lost herself in the process. Then she looked at me. I should have chosen you. There it was. The sentence she'd driven all this way to say. I met her eyes. Calm. Clear. You did choose, I said. Just not me. Tears welled up. She nodded. I know. And I live with that every day. I believed her. But belief doesn't equal obligation. She reached across the table. Stopped short. Pulled her hand back. I never stopped comparing him to you, she said. He never showed up the way you did. He never made me feel safe. I took a slow breath. Emily, I said, you don't miss me. You miss how you felt when you were with me. She looked like I'd struck something deep. Maybe, she whispered. But isn't that the same thing? No, I said gently. Because I didn't leave you. You left me. That landed. Silence again. This time heavier. I was hoping, she said carefully, that maybe we could try again. There it was. The ask. Not dramatic. Not desperate. But heavy with years of regret. I looked at her. Really looked. And I realized something that surprised even me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't tempted. I was done. I can't, I said. She nodded like she'd expected it, but still hoped she'd be wrong. I'm not the man you come back to after you've tried everything else, I continued. I'm not the lesson you learned too late. She wiped her eyes. I know, I don't deserve. This isn't about deserve, I said. It's about timing, and choice, and respect. I stood. You taught me something important, I added. You taught me what it looks like when someone values approval over character. And I build a life that doesn't depend on either. She stood too, shaking slightly. I loved you, she said. I nodded once. I know, but you didn't choose me when it mattered. I paused, then said the last honest thing I had for her. I hope you find peace. Truly. She watched me walk away. And for the first time in this story, I didn't look back. People think the hard part is saying no. It isn't. The hard part is living comfortably inside, that no once the noise dies down. After I walked away from that coffee shop, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel hollow either. What I felt was steady, like I'd finally put something heavy down and realized my hands were free. That night, I went home, cooked myself a simple meal, and ate it standing at the counter. Same routine I'd built over the years. Same quiet apartment. But the quiet felt different now. Settled. Earned. Emily didn't call again. Not that week. Not that month. Not even on the holidays, when nostalgia makes people reckless. I respected that. It told me she'd heard what I said, even if it hurt. And I respected myself more for not reopening a door I'd already locked for a reason. Life didn't suddenly turn cinematic after that. No swelling music. No montage. Just progress. Work got better. I'd moved out of support and into systems planning. Less scrambling, more building. I like that. I like creating frameworks that didn't fall apart the second pressure showed up. Funny how that mirrored my personal life. I started saying no faster. Not rudely, just clearly. To overtime that wasn't worth it. To friendships that only existed when I was useful. To people who liked me best when I stayed small. Peace multiplies when you protect it. I dated a little. Nothing serious at first. Coffee. Walks. Conversations that ended when they were supposed to. I didn't rush. I wasn't chasing replacement. I was checking alignment. There's a difference. One woman told me I was emotionally distant. I smiled and said no. I'm emotionally selective. She didn't like that. That was fine. About 6 months after I saw Emily, a mutual friend slipped up. She's not doing great, they said too casually. I shrugged. I hope she figures it out. That was the truth. No bitterness. No satisfaction either. Just acceptance. The version of me who would have felt validated by her struggle didn't exist anymore. That man needed her regret to heal. I didn't. Then something unexpected happened. I met someone who didn't ask me to prove anything. Her name was Laura. We met the least romantic way possible, standing in line at a hardware store, both waiting on a single clerk who disappeared for 10 minutes. She joked about how the place felt like a test of patience. I joked back. Easy. We talked about home projects, about work, about nothing important and everything honest. When it was time to go, she said, "You want to grab a coffee sometime?" Now I've been thinking. Not I usually don't do this. Just direct. I like that. Laura didn't come from the same world as Emily. No polished expectations. No invisible audience. She asked questions because she wanted answers, not leverage. On our third date, she said, "I don't need a man to impress my parents. I need a man who sleeps well at night." I laughed. That's the highest standard I've ever heard. She smiled. I know. I didn't rush it with Laura. I told her the truth about my past when it mattered. Not as a warning, not as a sob story. Just context. She listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't compare herself. At the end, she said, "That must have hurt." "It did," I said. "And you didn't let it make you smaller." "No," I said. "I let it make me clearer." She nodded like that mattered. It did. A year after that coffee shop meeting, I ran into Emily one last time. Pure coincidence. Grocery store. Late evening. I was reaching for olive oil when I heard my name. I turned. She looked calmer. Still sad, maybe, but less frantic, like someone who'd stopped running and started paying attention to where they landed. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. We stood there, carts between us like neutral ground. "I heard you're seeing someone," she said. "Yes," I answered. She smiled faintly. "I'm glad." I believed her. She hesitated, then said, "I think about what you said. About choice. A lot." I nodded. "Good. That means it's stuck." She exhaled. I wish I'd understood sooner. I met her eyes. Not cold. Not warm. Understanding late is still understanding, I said. "Just don't waste it." She nodded. That was it. No plea. No apology to her. No reaching. We said goodbye like two people who'd finally accepted the truth instead of arguing with it. That night, Laura asked how my day was. I told her I ran into someone from my past. Anything unresolved? She asked. I thought about it. No, I said. Just confirmed. She smiled and handed me a beer. That's what real partnership looks like. Not fear, not comparison, not regret management, just presence. And that's when I knew, really knew, that the story wasn't about being left or being asked back. It was about becoming the kind of man who doesn't need either to feel whole. Two parts left, and the last ones matter most. There's a stretch of life people don't talk about much, the part after the lesson, before the reward. That's where I lived for a while. Things were good with Laura. Not loud good. Not post-it note on the mirror good. Just steady, honest. The kind of good that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need witnesses. We didn't rush words like forever. We didn't audition each other for roles. We paid attention. That alone set it apart from everything I'd lived before. Laura didn't ask me who I could become. She watched who I already was, and she didn't try to rearrange it. The first real test came quietly. Her company offered her a promotion, more money, more responsibility, more travel. The kind of opportunity that usually comes with a catch hiding behind a handshake. She told me over dinner. No drama, just information. I'm thinking about it, she said. I nodded. How do you feel about it? She smiled a little. That's what I wanted to know if you'd ask. She explained the upsides. Then the cost. Time, energy, distance sometimes. I listened, didn't interrupt, didn't sell myself as an obstacle or a sacrifice. When she finished, I said, whatever you choose, I'm good. Just don't choose it because you're afraid not to. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's why this works, she said. Because support isn't about shrinking so someone else can grow. It's about standing firm so growth doesn't turn into escape. A month later, Emily emailed me. Not a call, not a text, an email. That alone told me she wasn't asking for anything. She said she'd been in therapy, that she was finally unpacking the difference between approval and love, that she'd started saying no to her parents for the first time in her life, and that it terrified her. She didn't apologize again. She didn't ask to meet. She didn't mention getting back together. She just said, thank you. You were the first man who loved me without trying to shape me. I didn't know how rare that was until it was gone. I read it once, then again. Then I closed the laptop. Some messages don't require replies. They complete themselves. I didn't tell Laura about the email right away. Not because I was hiding it, because it didn't matter. That's another thing people misunderstand. Transparency doesn't mean everything carries weight. Some things are just echoes. When I did mention it, weeks later, Laura listened and nodded. Sounds like she's finally growing, she said. Yeah, I replied. Just not in my direction. She smiled. Good. No jealousy. No insecurity. Just clarity. That winter, Laura and I took a trip west. No schedule. No checklist. Just miles and silence and music when it fit. One night, sitting by a fire outside a small rental cabin, she said something that stuck with me. I used to think love was about intensity, she said. Big emotions. Big gestures. I poked at the fire. What do you think now? I think real love is boring to people who confuse chaos for passion. I laughed. That's the most accurate thing I've heard all year. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I feel safe with you, she said. That word again. Safe. It isn't flashy. It doesn't trend. But it's the foundation everything else stands on. Emily had said it too, after the damage was done. Laura said it while building something that didn't need repair. A few months later, my mom met Laura. My mom isn't subtle. Never has been. She watches. She listens. She waits. After dinner, while Laura was helping with dishes, my mom leaned toward me and said quietly, she doesn't compete with you. I nodded. I noticed. That's good, my mom said. That's how you know. That night, driving home, Laura asked, so, how'd I do? I smiled. She likes you. Laura raised an eyebrow. That's not easy. I know. She looked at me for a long second, then said, I don't need to be the most impressive woman in the room. I just need to be the right one for you. That was it. That was the line. Not long after, Emily's parents reached out. Not to me directly, to a mutual acquaintance. Apparently, Emily had finally drawn lines they didn't like. Reduced contact, boundaries, independence. Funny how strength gets labeled disrespect when it shows up late. I felt no urge to intervene, no urge to validate myself through their regret. That chapter was finished. One evening, Laura and I were sitting on the couch, not talking. Comfortable silence. The good kind. She looked over and said, "You ever think about how different your life could have been?" I thought about it. "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes. And I'm glad it isn't." She smiled. That's when I understood something simple and unshakable. The woman who left taught me what happens when love needs permission. The woman beside me showed me what happens when it doesn't. One more part left. And this one isn't about her coming back. It's about why I never needed her to. People think closure comes from answers. It doesn't. It comes from alignment. From a moment when your life finally makes sense to you, without requiring permission, apology, or validation from anyone who walked away. That's what this part is about. Laura and I never had a dramatic turning point. No big speech. No sudden revelation. Just a quiet accumulation of right choices made consistently. One evening, after a long walk, we were sitting on the porch watching the sky change colors. She handed me a glass of water and said, almost offhandedly, "You know, you don't flinch anymore." I looked at her. "At what?" "At happiness," she said. "Some people brace for it like it's temporary." That landed harder than she knew. She was right. For a long time, I've been waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for love to ask me to prove myself again, waiting to be weighed, measured, ranked. That never happened with her, because she didn't love conditionally, and because I no longer offered myself conditionally either. The past didn't vanish. It just lost its authority. Emily became a story I could tell without tightening my jaw, without wondering if I'd failed, without needing to reframe anything to protect my ego. I saw it clearly now. She didn't leave because I lacked something. She left because she couldn't stand still long enough to recognize value when it wasn't loud. That was her journey, not my burden. One night, months later, Laura asked me a question that mattered. If she came back again, she said, not suspicious, not afraid, would it change anything for you? I didn't answer right away, not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to be precise. No, I said, not because I'm loyal to you, though I am, but because I'm loyal to myself now. She nodded like that was exactly the answer she expected. That's the difference between love built on fear and love built on choice. Fear needs reassurance. Choice just shows up. We didn't rush marriage either. We talked about it like adults talk about weather and logistics and values. We talked about conflict styles, about money, about aging parents, about how we wanted arguments to end. One night, she said, if we ever stop choosing each other, we say it out loud. No silent exits. I took her hand. Agreed. No disappearing acts. No private doubts turned into public damage. Just honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then. Years ago, I would have taken Emily back if she'd asked. Not because she deserved it, but because I didn't yet understand that being chosen late is not the same as being chosen well. Now I do. I don't resent her for the lesson, but I don't repeat classes I've already passed. One afternoon, long after the dust had settled, I ran into someone who knew the old version of me. They asked casually, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if she stayed?" I smiled. "No," I said, "because I know what happened when she left." That's when I became a man who stopped negotiating his worth. That's when my life stopped being a reaction. That's when peace stopped feeling temporary. This story isn't about revenge. It isn't about her regret or my restraint. It's about something simpler and harder. Walking away from anyone who needs you to be less so they can feel more. Choosing the quiet life over the impressive one. Choosing consistency over approval. Choosing yourself without apology. She came back asking for a door I'd already closed. Not out of anger. Not out of pride. But because the house behind it was finally built right. And once you live in a place like that, you don't reopen old exits. You lock them gently. And you keep going.